this is a part of being a business owner. So do not let this change dictate, your path forward. I really want, when Justin and I have kids, I want them to be very proud of their mom. And he would always say, I see how hard you work for other people. Like, as an entrepreneur himself, you can do this if you find something that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Moving around, packing up, my mom having to find new dentists.
Okay, here we are, episode 6 for the Rate of Success podcast. I am incredibly excited to be joined by Jessica Vrba. So Jessica is a realtor we've been working with for a period of time, and I highly respect the way she does her business. So I'm excited to kind of talk through some of that because I think it's important, as we go through the market, organization, structure. I feel like Jessica has a great handle on that, so I'm excited to kind of dig into that a little bit. So Jessica, why don't you talk a little bit about how long you've been in the business, where you're currently at office-wise, and we'll start there.
Okay. So I am with Keller Williams Infinity out of Naperville, and I've been in the business a little over 3 years now.
It's great.
Yeah, it's gone by really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great. I started in corporate.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. So I always love getting into kind of what we did before because, as I always say, nobody plans to be in real estate.
No.
They kind of end up here by mistake. It's not like when you go to college, you're like, I'm going to be a realtor when I grow up. Like,
I'm getting my education and I'm going to end up in sales.
Yeah, exactly. There's no career path where you sit down with your guidance counselor and they say, I want to be a realtor. So we all end up here by mistake. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you did before, kind of getting into real estate?
Yeah. So I graduated from Ohio University.
Okay.
Not Oklahoma. I feel like everybody always thinks it's Oklahoma, but Ohio University. My background was in communications and marketing. So every person in my family, it was just like you go to college.
Yeah.
You go to college, you get your 9 to 5, and you do your 401k and all that stuff. I loved my classes in college. So I enjoyed it, but I didn't know anything else. Then I met my husband after I moved here from Ohio. So my family lives in Ohio.
Okay.
I moved here, met my now husband probably a year after living here, and he is a business owner.
Okay.
So he saw, we were together for like 4 or 5 years, I think, while I was working for corporate, and he saw how motivated and self-disciplined and just self-motivated I was. And he would always say, I see how hard you work for other people. Like, as an entrepreneur himself, you can do this if you find something that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And so we bought our first investment property, I think back in 2017 or 2018. That kind of got me into housing a little bit. So I kind of understood. I mean, we did a lot of the design work and all of that. I found passion in that.
Yeah.
And then I saw a lot of opportunity and how lucrative the real estate industry is. After, I think I was working for a company through COVID.
Were you doing traveling and all that for the job? I mean, was it pretty intense?
Yeah, it was a lot. So I was leading the company's first global initiative in my division.
Okay.
And I was doing that all from home because it was during COVID. And it was like the most stressful thing I've ever done. I never want to go back to like that place. So I was like, you know what? I have to find something that I want to do on my own. And then I got into real estate.
So you got your real estate license, jumped right in. So I think it's interesting because you mentioned something about your husband, obviously getting you in. Because I don't think people realize it's something I talk a lot about on this podcast, but also to my team, is I don't think people realize how important having support at home is for what we do.
Absolutely.
And I think we take it for granted a lot. One of the questions I always ask, my team before they want to become a loan officer, I don't ask them anything about the career. I'm like, what is your home life like? Like, would you have support at home? Like, can you take a phone call at 10 o'clock at night and not get the business?
And not get a filed for divorce.
Yeah, so I love the fact that you mentioned that because I think a lot of people overlook that. And I think we don't realize, we're almost like a team.
We are, and there's a lot of understanding. There's a lot of give.
Yeah.
And Justin and I say all the time, like, we have a hard time relating to other couples just because the amount of grace we have to give to one another a lot of the time that, our friends who have 9-to-5 jobs, just, they can't get a full understanding, and that's not their fault. It's just.
Well, and your husband owns a business, so that, you both have those same responsibilities in a lot of ways.
Yes.
So that helps out. So that's a big difference, because I don't think who knows, maybe if he did not give that support and push you,
I wouldn't be doing this.
Exactly.
No, absolutely. We say all the time, I would not be doing what I'm doing without his support.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do it because, like I said, I came from a family where it was go to college, you get your 9-to-5, and that's it.
Yeah.
But Justin, like, completely opened up my eyes where I'm like, oh my gosh, there's just unlimited potential.
And I love that, because I think a lot of people get into real estate for all the wrong reasons.
100%.
And it's why, that's the 80-20 rule.
Yes.
And it could almost be
use that
now
all the time.
like the 90-10 rule almost is like, because you go into it with this expectation that it's going to be easy.
Oh my God.
And it's not.
No. Selling sunset?
No, exactly. I mean, it's what we do every day is not as glamorous.
No, is what we portray it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we all post on social media like everything's great, but I think you do a good job, though, and I wanted to touch on that a little bit. You do such a great job on social media.
Thank you.
And you have this, to be in the business for 3 years. I've been in the business for over 20 years.
Right.
Okay. And you see, I meet and talk with a lot of realtors, but you see people enter the business and they have this, kind of, I don't want to say instant success, because you would probably not, it doesn't feel that way to you.
Yeah, no.
But to me, from the outside looking in, 3 years in the business to see where you're at, to me, that's instant. Okay.
Yeah.
You have this great, social media platform. You do an amazing job managing transactions. And again, I deal with realtors every day. So you do a great job of that. And so how much of what you do today kind of goes back to that corporate background, but then also, I know growing up, college, like there's always probably something in there, because you have a very specific process of the way you do things. And I think a lot of times we think that everybody does that.
I do.
I will tell you that everyone does not. So if you could talk a little bit about not so much the process, but how that helps you each and every day. Because I feel like you have from the outside looking in, it looks like you have a good control of the business.
Yeah, that definitely came from, I would say, my father. Yeah. I'm a military kid.
Okay.
So we grew up very disciplined, but cut this out. My sister, doesn't matter how you were raised, I do think a lot of that does have to do with my personality. I'm just a very disciplined person, and I'm very routined. I thrive on routine. I go to the gym every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I try to get at the same time, but it's always like on the dot at like 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock. Like, I'm just very routine in that way.
You have kind of a way that you do.
Yes. And I have a hard time if I deviate away from that. Justin, my husband, has taught me a lot about being flexible, and like, especially in this industry, you have to be flexible. And I have become a little bit better at doing that, especially because we work in such a dynamic industry. Things are always changing. You have to pivot. An appraisal comes in low. What are you going to do? You got to pivot. You got to renegotiate.
But making time for yourself is important, though, for those workouts, because I'm the same way in the morning, because I feel like I'm a better person to my clients if I take care of myself better. Like I need to have some time to myself
100%.
And time with family to be able to be better. And if I'm not the same person. So it is very important, I love how you have structure. So corporate life, are there any kind of similarities between corporate life and what you do now? We joked about it before, but how much of the things that you hated about corporate life have you now implemented in your own
business?
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of the systems that I use came from corporate. So I have a project management system that if I'm working with a bunch of clients at one time, it's called Monday.
Oh, we use Monday. So I love it.
That came from corporate.
Okay, yeah.
And I try to implement that. I also do a lot of work with my husband's business.
Okay.
Trying to implement, project management systems. So that was a program I used at one of my businesses, or one of the companies that I used to work for. And then like Google Drive, just a lot has come from work. And then I worked for a company, Salesforce was really big. So I'm very familiar with CRM systems and how those work, and how to do drip campaigns. Like all of that came from the experience I had with corporate. So I would never change anything about my past.
Yeah.
Like I would never say, oh, I wish I never worked for corporate. I wish I just got into real estate because it's so lucrative. And I would never take any of that back.
Well,
I don't never want to go back.
Well, and I think that's why people hire you, though, is because you have we joke about how we get into real estate, but that's what people are hiring is those experiences that we've had before,
right.
that structure that we bring to the table. People are hiring not just you, they're hiring your process, your 100%. Systems, and all the things that you do because they want someone to manage. I mean, at the end of the day, we're like an air traffic controller, in a transaction.
Exactly.
We're handling, and the moment we make a mistake or the moment we do anything, it can cost someone money.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So having good systems and a good process, when you get into real estate, they make it seem like you just get licensed and you go out and you get clients. Yeah, and you do it.
Yeah.
And then you do it, you help a friend and you do some transactions and you're like, okay, this is okay. But then once those go away, you have to build a business. And the thing that I always say is like the people that are successful run it like a business. And everything that you talked about with your husband, you're running it like a business.
Yes.
And the moment you can kind of understand that and appreciate that more, I think the better you're able to kind of, because for 3 years in the business, you have a good handle on a lot of things that I think a lot of people struggle with. Okay. So let's talk about this. We had a lot change over the last, you've been in the business, 3 years.
Yeah.
So I think you have a unique perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. So you went from, 3% rates where, we were all, as I say, awesome.
Yes.
And phone was ringing. Yeah.
Thriving.
So thriving, phone's ringing. We all it's easy.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was probably an easy transition. Yeah. Going from corporate because you're like,
I'm
this is great.
Yeah. It's coming to me.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
We're all good.
So then the market shifts.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was that transition like for you? Okay.
Yep.
And the reason why I ask is I think you have a unique perspective because, well, we've been through, personally, I've been through other markets and stuff like that. Yeah. This is your first time going through it. So what was that like for you? Because I feel like you've done an amazing job through it. Thank you. But what was that transition like, and what was kind of your goal of how you wanted to structure your business once kind of the waterfall turned off? Yeah,
that's a great question. And I will once again bring it back to my husband. He always said, like, in entrepreneurship, being your own business owner, there's ebbs and flows. He always says like the law of averages. So he was saying, this is a part of being a business owner. So do not let this change dictate, your path forward.
Yeah.
So I sat with that and I was like, it was a tough year. I mean, it was a tough year.
Yeah.
It was a tough year for, I feel like, a lot of businesses just in general, not just our industry. I just stuck with it. I kept doubling down. They always say double down on your, your touches or anything like that with past clients or contacts. And that's what I did.
So do you have your database, so you have your sphere, your, group of people?
Yes.
Because everybody does business
differently. Right.
Some people focus on leads.
Yes.
Some people focus on open houses. Some
Yes.
people, you seem like you are very relationship driven.
Yes.
Which is unique.
Yeah.
But I said this yesterday, and I think it's very important. I think everyone was relationship driven for a while. Then they went to a little bit different path. People were trying different things and maybe trying to do the easy button or, all these different, whether it be Zillow leads or whatever else. And I feel like everyone's kind of coming back to, relationship.
Yeah, it's really important.
And what was kind of your reason for focusing on that? Did it fit more your style, or was it more just, did you ever think a lot about that?
So I have always been a very loyal and trustworthy person, and I'm always advocating for people who may not have, as much knowledge in a particular area.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is a great opportunity for me to gain trust in my clients. I am very transparent, and I know you know that. When I'm talking with my clients, I'm not a beat around the bush person. I want to communicate with my clients so they feel like they're getting the information they need to make decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
That is really important to me. I say my 3 pillars of business are honesty, trustworthy, and communication. Those are just really big to me as an individual. And it benefits me in my business because when I'm talking with my clients, they know this is she's being highly communicative and very honest with us. And then they feel empowered to make decisions that work for them and their family. and it's worked.
Yeah.
They feel empowered to make these decisions. And I feel like, real estate agents, like before I got into the industry, I'm like, oh, they're like car salesmen.
Yeah.
And I hate, like, I do not want to deal with a car salesperson. Like, I just want to go in, buy my car, and leave me alone.
Yeah.
I never want somebody to feel that way when I'm working with them.
Yeah.
That's important to me.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing worse than buying a car. That experience, I think about it all
terrible.
the time.
It's like, oh.
And it hasn't changed in years.
Yeah, it's awful.
And you figure how much our business has changed.
Yes.
And we're always trying to find ways to make it better, streamline it, do things in a different manner.
Yeah.
One of the things I think you do a really good job at, and why I think this recent change, I remember when we talked for the first time and we started talking about NAR.
Yeah.
I was calling everyone and just kind of checking in.
And I appreciated that so much.
Yeah. And I remember we spoke, and I just remember how quickly you were to respond. Like you had obviously put a tremendous amount of thought.
Oh yeah.
And
anxiety.
What I always respected with your response, because as many people as I spoke to, yours stuck out with me when we spoke, is typically I would get a response complaining about, the rule change.
Yeah.
Okay. And you immediately went to the solution.
Yeah.
And
what am I gonna? It's a change.
Exactly.
You gotta adapt with it.
And I think that is something that is not the norm in our industry.
Sure.
And it's important that you want to be able to take something that is a problem and have a solution immediately.
Absolutely.
And I loved how you did it. So August 17th happens. You had this great take on it. You actually shared your buyer presentation with me. Yeah. And I was blown away. I think I told you, I was like, this is a great buyer presentation. Like, I love it,
Yeah.
And I told you right away, I thought it was great. So how did you always have the same buyer presentation? Because I think most people have a listing presentation. So what does that upfront process look like for you? How much have you changed it since August 17th? Or is it pretty much what you've always done?
I've changed them pretty much. As I am always somebody that as I learn things, I go back, I do the legwork, and I make the updates then and there, because you're going to forget.
Yeah.
So as soon as the NAR lawsuit came about, I'm like, okay, update your buyer consult to include, reasons to work with me as your agent. And oh my gosh, the resource you provided us with the 101 or whatever things that the buyer. I have that now as a part of the, I don't think it was in the consultation you sat on, but I included that.
Yeah.
So I'm always updating my resources for my clients, so it's the most up-to-date information.
Yeah. And how much have you felt like, I haven't noticed much of a change, but now that we're 2 months into it,
none.
That's why I think it's so powerful about how you dealt with it at the time.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, there was a lot of people that had a lot of...
Oh, the world was crumbling.
Yeah, negative energy.
Yeah.
Where you had this, great mindset.
Yeah.
You were kind of like, well, it is what it is, and I'm going to do this, and this is what my process is going to be now, and this is what I'm doing.
Yep.
So you take out all that noise that a lot of people were experiencing, and you were able to effectively just communicate it to clients, and you used it as an opportunity, which I think is unique.
Yes.
So, does that kind of mindset that you have come from, again, military child and corporate background? Because again, I think it's somewhat unique in our industry.
Yeah, I think a lot of it does come from, my background and my experiences, but I just think the type of person I am, I am somebody, I don't want to say I do all of this because of control.
Yeah.
But a part of it does come from, I want to make sure that I am representing my clients in the best possible way I can.
Yeah.
So what can I do to explain this and elaborate on this situation, that it is what it is, but kind of, communicate with them that this really isn't a big deal for you guys.
Yeah.
I have implemented something in my buyer's consultation now where I ask them, do you know how I, as your buyer's agent, am compensated?
I love that.
And they go, no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, this is where this lawsuit, because I do touch on the lawsuit, because I touch on it because I have to have them sign a buyer's agreement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have those resources just in case in my back pocket on the NAR lawsuit. Never had to send it over, but I have it just in case. I let them know this lawsuit came about because buyers were not aware of how agents were compensated, or in sellers as well. They didn't know where that compensation was going.
Yeah.
And I use the Chicago Title or Chicago One app
in
my net sheets. And it itemizes it. I am transparent. I don't care if I work so hard for my clients. I don't care if you transparently you can see how much I am compensated. Now it dwindles down. That is not the amount that we are getting paid, but I'm just all about transparency.
So I love that you keep mentioning transparency because in one of my earlier podcasts, I actually told a story how we are so transparent.
Oh my gosh, you guys are amazing.
Yeah, so we share a lot. I learned that the hard way. Okay.
Okay.
So I used to carry a lot of that personally because I didn't want to ruin your day.
Are you an Enneagram 3?
No.
Do you know your Enneagram?
No, I have no idea what
I'm
that is.
I'm going to make you take the test.
I have no idea.
You're an Enneagram 3.
Okay. But I would carry that because I didn't want to give bad news. So I would get it done, but I would lose sleep over it. And I was like, but then the problem is nobody knew what I was doing to get deals done. So I was providing no value, okay? So I had someone tell me, so I won't go through the story again, but it took me 10 years of my career to realize that. For you to be 3 years in, and you've mentioned transparency now multiple times, it is the single most important thing for me. It's one of my 3 pillars. Yep. And I always say transparency, speed, and experience. So for me, transparency is one of the most important things because the more transparent we are, the more you avoid that conversation with the client that you have to explain something to them.
Right.
But then it's also the client is never, what is Jessica not telling me?
Exactly. I cannot, as the person on that side, because I'm just such a skeptic at heart, I'm like, they're keeping something from me.
I know.
And what is it? And you're not telling me, and then I feel left in the dark, and I don't trust you then.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. And I think for being 3 years in the business, it's extremely important that you focus so much on. I think a lot of that has to do with your success because I think a lot of people struggle with that because we have this thing. It's easy to give good news.
100%.
Like when you sell it 10,000 over list and it's to a cash buyer, like that's an easy phone call to make.
100%.
It's the phone call that you have to make that is the buyer decided to walk because, whatever. I always say you got to judge yourself on those. Yeah. Not the easy calls anybody can do.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about how you handle, because we have a lot of very difficult conversations. And I think you've touched on it a little bit because I think everything you do before that call really sets itself up to where that call is a lot easier.
Yes.
But can you talk a little bit about, how you handle those and kind of what your process is for that?
Yeah. And I think you have, remember that one transaction we had earlier this year?
Yeah.
You not to get too involved in it, but I mean, I had a seller who was also buying. So they're contingent upon their purchase. And the buyer of our existing property just was, oh my gosh, just not committed. So after too long, we ended up saying we can't move forward with you. We had to go back on market. And I had to pray that seller, because in this market we were in, I was like, I have to pray that this seller is going to hold on to us. Yeah. Because if they're not going to hold on to us, this whole deal is dead. The sale and the purchase side. I had to have a conversation when the first buyer fell through with my seller client, hey, we're going to have to go back on market. I will do my very best to talk with the seller of your new home to keep this deal together, because in the market we were in, they could just drop us and go back on market and go under contract.
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because I feel like your professionalism and your ability to manage a transaction is why that transaction stayed together. Because while we were all set on our side, the sale obviously was not. Right. And the buyer felt comfortable enough with you, because as well as I do, if they did not trust you, they would have dropped us.
100%.
So, I think that process that you maintain and everything that you do leading up to that is what prepares you for that.
Those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those conversations are not easy, because I know, receiving that news, I know that these clients we work with, they have everyday lives. Yeah. They're working, they have kids, they're doing all these other things. And on top of that, selling a house or buying a house. I want to ease that burden, so I know when I deliver this news to them, it's not going to be good. But so my very first job, I used to work with dealerships.
Oh, okay.
So I used to get my ass chewed out regularly. So
we just talked about dealerships.
Yeah, we did. I know. And that's also why I don't like going to car salespeople, because I'm like, I know how you all are. Y'all are so mean. But, I don't want to say hardened me. It wasn't hardened, but that really like people are stressed out not because of you. It's because they have other things going on in their lives. And when you take out this isn't a personal attack on me, this stress, they have so many things going on in their world, and then, you know, the buyer, you know, backs out.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just hard news for them to swallow. So I have learned people's emotions are not personal.
Yeah.
You know, nothing's personal. They're just going through a lot. And I understand that. So I always say, I joke with my clients, I'm like, you can use me as a punching bag. They're like, I would never. And I'm like,
I again, to be 3 years in the business and to have that take on it is really important because, again, it's something I learned, you know, I used to take it personal. Like I was, you know, and I always say the worst comes out in people when they buy a house. It's
100%.
It's not who they are.
No.
It's just, you know, you have showings, you're packing up, you got a family,
There's
your kids,
so much
their
going on
kids
in their
are upset
lives.
because they've had this room while they were growing up, or they raised a family in this house and now they're moving. Even though they want,
hard.
even though they want the new house,
they're emotionally tied.
attached.
Yeah.
So like the emotions are at an all-time high.
Yes.
And even if everything goes perfectly, you can get a lot back from a client. Then when you have something go bad. That's
then
why
it's
I think
like worse.
That's why I think transparency. You got to give bad news early and often.
100%.
Yep. And I just feel like, you know, the more that you do that, the more people will trust you.
Yes.
And I always found too that if I give it early, and just, hey, this is what's going on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
This is where we're at, and this is what the solution's going to be.
Yes.
You know. Because a lot of times the good news is we have a solution.
100%.
And the one thing I will always, I appreciate, and I'll thank you for it now, is as a lender, there's nothing worse when you work with people who do not trust the solution.
Yeah.
And it takes so much energy away because I'm convincing them.
Yeah.
And let me work when I should be working on the loan to get it done.
Yeah.
And I always love the fact that whenever I call you and we are working on an issue, you're always like, okay, just let me know what you need to do.
And
have Juliet call me or whatever. And we're back working the solution.
Yeah.
Where there's other times where, oh, well, you know, my lender would have done this, or, you know, they start going in on you. And it just takes so much time and energy.
To just work through that.
Or they're calling the client and putting stuff in their head. The lender should have done this. And we don't get to the solution quick enough. So it takes a lot of like kind of professionalism to just, you have an issue, okay, now we're going to work towards the solution. And it makes a big difference because I feel like a lot of times we get in this area where we're not working together collectively as a team.
Yeah.
And it takes away from what should be our priority, which is the client.
Correct.
And that gets lost in a lot of these conversations. So how do you, 3 years in the business, how have you spent so much time just focusing on the customer? Because very naturally you could be focused on your business and want to focus on your business and want to focus on doing it. What was that kind of, way you grew up or corporate world? Like you have a very intense focus on the customer.
Yes. So that goes into, I should have said what my role was in corporate, and it was account management.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was always the account manager of X amount of accounts at one time. I was always the contact.
Okay.
And then I worked as the liaison between all the other departments. So that's kind of, that role hasn't changed as an agent.
Everything's starting to kind of, the puzzle's starting to come
goes
together.
Yes. Because I work with you, I know, okay, my clients need a mortgage.
Yeah.
Who do I know, love, and trust? Your guys' team. So I know to direct them in that manner.
Yeah.
I also have learned, I don't have the answers to everything. It doesn't matter what I try to portray. I'm not the end all be all, and I'm not knowledgeable in everything. I'm not the subject matter expert in anything but real estate. So that's why, trust, I've worked with you for X amount of years. I also work with the attorney I work with for X amount of years. I know, love, and trust you guys. And the processes that you guys have put into play allow me to say, I know they're handling it.
Yeah.
And that's big for me because as a natural skeptic, I'm like, I can only, because, it reflects on us.
Yeah. Oh,
the
absolutely.
agent.
Absolutely.
If I'm telling my clients like, hey, this is, a reputable lender. I've worked with him for X amount of years. And, all of my clients have always had great experiences with you guys because they have.
Yeah.
They trust me to then, go to you guys to get that part fulfilled. And I know, when something comes up, you guys handle it.
Yeah.
And I trust that that's going to be taken care of. So that's I feel so strong in that, team aspect.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think it's important.
It's so important.
So let's talk about the market a little bit.
Okay.
Because I always love your take. You do a lot of social media where you talk about the market. So what seems to be the biggest challenge right now for your sellers? So, so you have, obviously would assume, how could a seller have any problems? Homes are selling, but there is a lot of...
Yes, there is.
And I don't think people realize that when they talk about the market. So what's your biggest challenge right now with sellers?
My sellers do not want to give up their interest rate.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like every agent will tell you that. Like they're so like, which I think we talked about this too.
Yeah.
If you make it about interest rate, you're losing the point of, how about your monthly payment? We talked about that the other day. Like the focus should be on how much you can afford, not necessarily your interest rate. But that, we've gotten so focused on interest rates that now that's what people are.
Do you have, so obviously interest rates, so that's a natural thing. Do you have it where they just don't know if they're going to be able to find something?
Yes, and the time. So I've been doing a lot of like lease backs or rent backs to tell my clients like, hey, I know it's really scary to put your house on the market before you find something. But because of the way the market is, let's put it on the market. Let's try to get it under contract. And I'll negotiate, a 2-month lease back. That gives you 2 months to find a house.
Absolutely. Love that.
Yeah. And the likelihood of you finding a house in 2 months
do you ever do
is
anything
very high.
with reverse contingencies where the house is contingent? The sale is contingent on them finding something.
I have not.
Yes. So
we have to dive into that.
Yeah,
I have not.
So
I don't think I've been in that market necessarily, maybe.
I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding on reverse contingency. It would be a good conversation for an attorney because I'm obviously not an attorney.
Okay.
But I have started to see this more and more. I saw a lot of it towards the end of COVID.
Okay.
So it's basically you get an offer and it's contingent on the buyer finding another property. You can still do the lease back. Okay. Okay. So it's kind of an interesting reverse way of thinking about it. Yeah. Huh. And it kind of gets people thinking like, well, if I don't find something, then I don't, But and a lot of buyers are more willing to do whatever to get an offer accepted. So they're okay with it because they're like, okay, well, if it takes us 90 days, then whatever, we'll figure it out. So, and I'm sure I know the answer, but I want to hear if you have any different take on it. What's the biggest challenge that your buyers are struggling with right now?
I would say probably affordability. Okay. I mean, really, when I say affordability, I don't think they know what they're able to afford, and then they don't want to take the steps to, I'm like, just get a pre-approval.
Do you find that your buyer consultation or your listing presentation, if you can get to that point, do you feel like the objection becomes less? Or, you know what I'm saying is like, sometimes you have someone that says, you know what, I'm not ready to buy. But then you sit down with them for an hour. Yeah. And at the end of the meeting, they're like,
fine. Yes.
Yeah, they're totally fine.
Yes.
So it's, but then you start thinking to yourself, well, how many people are in this exact same position that aren't reaching out to me, that I'm not sitting in front of? Yep. And how do we get to those people to be able to help them understand? Because I always say we're not trying to convince someone to purchase. No. We're giving them the information to make an informed decision.
Correct.
So, and I say this to buyers all the time, there's going to be a point that you're going to look back. I mean, the average first-time home buyer is what, 34, 35? Uh-huh. Think about, how old were you when you bought your first rental property?
24.
Okay, so think about that. Think about that. Imagine if you did not do that at that age. Yeah. Okay? And if we could get more 23, 24-year-olds to purchase property and have 10 years to gain equity. Yeah. Because right now they're losing it. Uh-huh. Okay?
Oh, my God,
they're traveling. Yeah. They're buying expensive.
They're living outside of their means. I mean, I have never, I know when it comes to business, debt can be good. Absolutely, like a lot of business owners, they say you should carry some sort of debt. It's good for you. But as far as like credit card debt, I'm going to offend a lot of people. I don't carry credit card debt.
No,
I don't carry.
We're the same way. Jen and I are the same way.
Your credit card, like the interest rates on credit cards. I'm sorry, you're going to get upset over a 7%, 8%. I understand that loans on houses are much bigger. You have like a 25% on your credit card, and you're just going to be like, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's 25 cents for every dollar. That's nuts to me.
I always say like, there's when people come to me and they say, well, I can't afford to buy, I would always be like, okay, well, you have this much in a car payment.
Yes,
I'm going through your, we used to look at bank statements a lot more, but you're spending this much money out to eat. Now it's Uber Eats and everything else. Yeah. There's $500 to $1,000 a month in useless spending that with small changes.
Oh my gosh. big.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we talk about affordability. I think, to me, it's not so much an affordability crisis
I know
right
where you're going
now.
with this. I agree
think
with
it's
you.
a spending,
It's a spending problem.
It's a spending problem. And
it is.
We have a lot of 25 to 35-year-olds that are making way more money than I did at that age, okay?
Yeah.
That are, again, you talked about it, you go to college.
Yes.
You start a 401k, they're coming out of college with a great job.
Yep.
And they're making more money than when I was that age.
Right.
And, it's a spending problem.
It is. I think social media has a big, impact on that, because I think these younger kids are seeing these older, people in their 30s living a lifestyle that they will live one day, but they're in their 20s. So
Absolutely.
it's okay that you're not living in a lavish house or driving a lavish car yet. You're not there yet. You haven't put in your work to get there yet.
Absolutely. No, I think it's, I was just in Vegas. I wasn't going to tell this story, but I will.
Tell it.
I was just in Vegas, and my wife and I, we went up to the pool at our hotel at the Cosmopolitan, and we had the day club.
Oh yeah.
And there's all these.
You remember this story?
All these tables, and I asked the guy there, I'm like, how much do those? Because it's all these young kids.
Yeah. Oh, thousands.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, that one's 5,000. This one's 7,000. Those cabanas are 15,000.
And you see them in there. You're like,
And
okay,
I'm sure some of them can afford it, because I'm not going to say they can't, but I'm sure there's some there that shouldn't be there.
Sure. Yes.
That and I just it's a spending problem.
It is.
And I think education is so important.
Yeah.
Financial literacy is such a problem.
Yes.
You mentioned 401k. The amount of people that come to me to buy a home that are in their 30s, 40s, that have no money, save for retirement. I think there's a retirement crisis. I think there's a financial literacy crisis, and we don't learn it as a kid.
Nope.
We don't learn how to do. The only reason I learned it is because I look at everyone else's all day long.
True.
And I learned what not to do.
Yeah.
And I had some friends growing up that were in the financial industry, and they would always tell me like, "Oh, do you realize?" I used to get a shake at the gym when I would, I'd pay like $7 or something at the time. They'd be like, if you took that $7 every single day,
and
this is how much it would be.
Yes, they do that with Starbucks now.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You spent how much on Starbucks?
So I think there's a financial literacy gap that causes a lot of misunderstandings.
I would agree
about home buying, and I'm just wondering, what we can do as an industry from an education standpoint. Because I almost feel like it's our responsibility to sit down. So going back to the original point.
Yeah.
Meeting with buyers and sitting down and going through that, or a seller.
Yeah.
Like, how much emphasis do you focus on education versus the actual process of buying a house? Because I think everyone wants to know about how to buy a house, but that is all online. You can buy, you can watch YouTube videos all night. But how much of it is just like what you bring to the table and your different, like the difference you make?
Yeah, I would say a decent amount of it. I always try to give my clients a high level. So I have a roadmap. I have a seller roadmap in my seller presentation and a buyer roadmap, and it gives them a high level overview of what the process looks like. It is already a very overwhelming experience for them. Yeah. And sometimes I have to be like, okay, Jess, they're going to do this one time every 12 or 13 years. Like, try not to overwhelm them with info, but I want to give them the highlights, and so they feel comfortable and confident making informed decisions. So I do try to educate them, but I want to educate them just in the sense that they feel empowered to make their decisions. So,
is there anything that you enjoy more in the business?
Yeah.
Like, is there? Yeah. What do you enjoy more?
So, I love the marketing side.
Okay. So because you have a marketing background.
That was my background.
Okay.
Yeah. So I love the creativity. My husband always says, I have a lot of dreams. They are wild. I mean, when I'm sleeping and I wake up, I'm like, what the heck? What was that?
Yeah.
But I'm a very creative individual. So the marketing side, I really love. And then I've always tried to explain myself as like, I look at life like this.
Yeah.
Okay. I look at it's crazy.
Yeah.
And then I want to just unwind it all and make it straight.
Okay.
So I take everything that's crazy, let me refine it, and then deliver it in digestible pieces.
I love that, because I think you do a great job on social media. I think you do. It's very personable. Yeah. You don't just post about real estate, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of weird sometimes. Though,
no, I'll go sometimes in your stories, and all of a sudden it's clothing. I'm like, okay, this isn't for me. But I love how you do that, because I think people that's your brand. That's why people want to work with you. Is you're creating an audience. It's perfect, because I think sometimes we just only post. It's funny. I have all this content that I put out there, and a picture of I have of me and my son.
Yeah.
When we went to breakfast.
I love your family. When you guys do the family post, it makes you so much more relatable.
Oh, 100%.
Because it's like, everybody knows you already do a great job.
Yeah,
everybody knows that you and your team are like the best. We know that. So then to see like a more intimate side is like,
exactly,
they're the best. And then they're also personable. Like it's just like a good package.
I know and I think that there's a lot to say about, and I think you do something I say all the time, which I think you do a great job at. And I don't even know if you realize how great of a job you do. So I wanted to talk about it. The one thing I say a lot to realtors or even my team is we have to tell the story more.
Yeah.
So it's not just listed.
Right.
It's not just sold.
Yeah.
You had a situation recently and you got on there and you told the story.
That wasn't so happy.
No,
like
it wasn't a happy story. It had a happy ending.
Yes, it did.
But talk a little bit about, kind of what, and I'm assuming it's your marketing background, but a lot of times people post just listed.
Yeah.
Just sold.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to relate to that.
It's like, okay, wow, they're doing really good.
Yeah.
And that agent might be like struggling in the back end to post.
Exactly. But you kind of will go into my buyer did this, my seller had to do this, and you go into it and you're not revealing personal information.
Yes, I tried very carefully with that.
You're relating a story.
Yes.
So someone else is watching that and saying, you know what, that's my situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
They were able to do this. They were able to sell and buy and get 10,000 over list, and they were able to get rid of their low rate.
Yeah.
You're motivating people to reach out to you. So can you talk a little bit about kind of where you started doing that and why?
Yeah. So I think it all started with, if I learned something, I was also always the kid. I was not annoying in school, okay? But if I had a question, I asked the question because I'm like, I'm not the only one that doesn't know.
So you were the one that was always raising your hand when you were trying to get out of class?
No, and I would never do it at the end. Like, come on, like I'm not like that. But like, if I could tell, it's almost like I have a sense of like, if the teacher was saying something and like right class and nobody responded, I'm like, no one knows what the hell they're doing. So I'm like, can you elaborate? But like, I always, and even I was in a class with realtors and I raised my hand and then I put it down and a girl turned around, she goes, no, raise your hand again. Like you always ask questions and I like, we need the answers to. Yeah. So I'm just not afraid. I don't care. Like, I don't want to say I don't care if people don't like me, but I always try to, I'm like, I'm not the only one that needs this answered, and I want it clarified so I can, respond to my clients or audience better. So it started out with, if I didn't know it, my audience probably doesn't know it either. So I would share information I learned so somebody can maybe learn from that, like learn from that mistake or, whatever the case may be.
I just love it because I feel like that's what shows your brand.
Yeah.
And it kind of, I don't know if you
like
realize
perfectly
this,
imperfect,
but everything that you talk about yourself, about transparency and all that.
Yeah.
When you tell those stories, it kind of shows those without having to promote it. So you can make a post and you say, these are my 3 pillars.
Yes.
And that's self-serving, obviously.
Yep.
The way you do it is so much more, impactful.
Yeah.
Because you're telling the story about what happened.
Yes.
You're breaking it down and you're saying, this is how we handled it.
Yep.
And this is what I was able to do.
Right.
And I think that's very impactful. So I think it goes a long way and it says a lot about you. So how much, does your day-to-day, social media, like, do you think about it a lot? Do you put a lot of, like, does it consume you too much at times?
Yeah. So there'll be times where I'm like, like when I'm on vacation, I'm like, I don't want to ruin my vacation by posting, But then I don't want to come across as like, you have to be careful that you're not bragging. Like, I'm on this luxurious vacation, Yeah. So like always like I'll like post, but it'd be like, I'm working, because I am working, but it's,
So that's interesting because I can relate to that a little bit because you should be able to enjoy yourself.
Right.
And you should be able, like, is there something that where you're
an individual.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
Just who we are.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's hard because like even there'll be days where I'm like, okay, I could just take the day off. And I'm like laying and I'm like, go do something. Like, what do you do? Like, and I don't. I couldn't tell you. I could tell you more times I took off when I worked for corporate than I do now. Yeah. Because there's just something where it's like you're not making a good use of your time if you're not doing something productive.
You think you get that from the military background in your family?
I think that's a personality trait.
Personality trait?
I think it's a personality trait. Okay, yeah. Which is difficult. But.
Yeah, because I find it hard to just sometimes turn it off.
Yeah, it's
like
constantly.
I feel like I'm always on. Yeah. Even when I'm present with my wife.
You need to work on that.
I can still in my mind be thinking like, oh my God, I forgot to do this, or I forgot to do like, And
I hope she calls you out.
I know
that.
she does all the time.
Yeah.
She does.
It's hard.
Yeah,
It's hard. It's a hard thing to manage, and like back to being with a spouse that's supportive.
Yeah.
Like, because Justin's that way. I can like when I'm at home and I know I'm done. Like my working hours, I am very strict with.
Yeah.
I work 8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Yeah.
365. If that's not enough for you, I might not be your agent.
Yeah.
Because I can't. Now my husband, that's me personally.
Yeah.
That's a boundary.
Yeah.
My husband's like, taking a phone call at like 11 p.m. and that's totally fine. Like, I mean, you know, in moderation.
Yeah.
But I mean, having a supportive spouse that like, we know why you do that.
Yeah.
Like it's to keep your family. Like, do you like doing these things?
I mean,
it's a burden. I know it's a burden.
My wife is kind of the perfect combination of she's supportive, but she's also needs to knock me down a little bit.
100%. Yes.
Because
we love women like that.
Well, I mean, I need it. Like, I'll complain about it at times, but like I need to.
It's bringing you back.
Well, yeah, because
like,
sometimes when you're here and I'm filming a podcast or doing something, like I'll feel, and I'll say, "Oh, Jen, what about that?" And she's like, well, I need you to do that. Like, it brings me back, like you need to do this or you need to do it.
It holds you accountable.
Yes.
And I'm sure it grinds your gears. I know it grinds Justin's gears,
yeah.
but there is value in that because we know how hard
it's one of the most
work.
important things. And I remember something that our number one loan officer said, Sean, he's, just extremely dynamic individual, does a lot of business.
Yeah.
Ridiculous amounts of business. I mean, he did $2 billion in 1 year. And he said, I may be number one. His wife said this to him. You may be number one at work, but you're number 4 at home because he has 3 daughters. and it was like such a like kind of reminded me of like it doesn't matter what, but we need that support system at home. It's important. Yeah. But I think sometimes it's also someone to kind of hold us accountable
100% and say like, hey, you are more than your work.
Yeah.
Like you're more than your brand. You are like. We love you for who you are, not just what you do.
And there's a lot of egos in our business.
Oh my gosh. I've only dealt with like 1 or 2.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I'm so happy for you and your success. I love that.
Yeah.
But let's get this transaction moving.
I know,
exactly,
like, okay.
Exactly. I have respect for people who've been
there's
in
so many
longer.
egos in my business. There's so many egos in yours. And it's like, I always want to make sure that that's not how people remember me. I want to be confident.
Yes.
But I don't want to
have an ego to me.
I don't want to have that ego because it'll ruin a lot of what we do in a lot of different ways. So, okay, so we talked about social media a little bit. The other thing I wanted to kind of go through is I think you do a good job. You've talked a lot about your husband. I feel like I need to have him on the podcast. He seems like
so my yin to my yang. Like we're just opposites in the way we need to be, but very similar in the ways that are.
No, I love to hear that because when you have support systems, it makes such a big difference.
It really does.
And
not that we don't have challenges. I mean, nobody's perfect.
But that's the. I mean, listen, I've been married for 20 years. I just celebrated my 20 year.
I know, congratulations.
And it's when people ask me like, what's the secret? There's no secret.
Yeah,
there's no secret.
It's a lot
of patience. There's
the commitment, the vows that you made this oath to this person.
Yeah, and it's a lot of understanding. Like it's not always going to be perfect. And we talked about it in business a lot too. It's and I tell my team all the time is you can't celebrate your wins too much, and you can't like be depressed too much in your lows. It's really trying to find that even ground.
Yeah. It's so hard sometimes.
And really kind of, on paper, it's never going to look the way you want it. And you have to be okay with that.
Yes.
And you have to kind of, I always say, thrive in chaos. When things really get crazy, that has to be your moment to kind of step up. And you have to want that pressure. Yep. So as far as like, you do a good job, I feel like, on you have fun outside of work.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I do.
So how do you, and we talked a little bit about it, but like, it's a struggle, work-life balance. You hear it all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's tough in our business because we never quite get away.
Yeah,
but
we don't.
How much of a focus do you and your husband make on that time?
Yeah.
Because it's so important.
It's so important.
You're still, technically newly married.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, how do you make that time? Because as 2 business owners,
oh my God, it's I mean,
work could consume
it does,
yeah, and then, but I think you do a good job of kind of taking that time to get away.
Yes.
Have fun.
Yes.
And I can relate to that because my wife and I did that a lot before we had Jake.
Amazing.
We would travel a lot.
You still do.
Well, now it's a little different now.
Now it's ruined.
Now it's different.
Just kidding, Jake.
We love it. It's just different. Okay. So how do you, like, is that something you guys plan out?
Yeah.
And how do you do? Yeah.
So when we first met, Wednesdays were just our thing every Wednesday. And like I could probably count on one hand how many Wednesdays we've missed. And we've been together for over 7.5 years.
That's great.
So we make an effort, even if it's just like, we try to do, it's not watching TV. It's we'll go out to dinner or we'll go to a movie or just something that he and I can spend time together. He's getting better at putting like his foot down because it's like, you know, as a business owner, like you said, it could just run us crazy. Wednesdays is like, you know, at 5:36 now, but like he'll put his foot down and we go do something together. As far as like traveling goes, I'm better at letting my clients know, hey, I'm going to be out of town. I still have contact with you, but it may be limited. Because I came from a corporate background and I feel like a lot of the clients we work with work for corporate, they're very understanding that people have lives outside of their work. So they're very understanding of that. And I never ignore them. I still respond to them.
I think that's where the transparency comes in, is you just let them know.
I let them know I'm going to be out of, like, I just put a listing timeline together for a client and it says, Jessica out of office. Yeah. And they don't care.
Yeah, no.
Like, they're like, okay, she's going to be out of office. I'll say, I'll still have communication. It just may be limited. They're like, oh, we don't want to list that week. Yeah. You know, we'll list the other, like, perfect, you know? So
I think that all comes in transparency. So on that, you're a single agent. You know, obviously Keller Williams has lots of teams.
Yeah.
Is that something you want for yourself in the future, or do you like not having the responsibility of managing a team? And I know you dabbled a little bit in being on a team, and you ended up going on yourself, which ultimately that worked out for yourself. So, you know, have you thought about that? Is there any, you know, plans for the future, or?
You know, I know
never say never.
Never say never. Yeah. Never say never. Because I have learned a lot about having my background, then being on a team, and how I work as an individual. And I've learned a lot about myself and how I thrive in individuality. But I wouldn't say that I wouldn't be opposed to having help along. I'm not going to say never, but like, you know, a team, there's a lot of dynamics. You're, you know, with Justin and his company, you're HR, you're a lot of things. Yeah. So, and then, you know, as a woman, it gets a little bit hard, you know, when we have children, you know, that's a whole separate topic, but, you know, that's an additional layer of complexity. Yeah. Never say never. Not sure about it right now.
I will be the first vote for you if you ever did do it. I think you'd be an amazing single agent. But as someone who runs a team, I would hire you in a heartbeat to run a team. Yeah. I think you would be amazing, because I feel like the most important thing of managing a team and getting people to buy into your vision is having a process for people to buy into. Right. And I think that's one of the things where most people struggle as a team. Yeah. You know, a lot of people have teams and it never solves their problem because they're just throwing people at problems.
Right. And it's chaos.
And there's no process.
I mean, there's no process. Oh my God.
You're like, I just don't want to do this. So here.
I would never. I am so structured. And like, if you look through my Google Drive, it's like 2024. And then you go into 2024 and it's like my clients. Or then I have like buyer resources and seller resources. And when I go into my buyer resources,
so are you a control freak then, like on stuff?
Am I a control freak?
Like if you were to delegate something to someone else,
delegate.
Would you look over their shoulder?
No.
And okay, so that's good. That's
I would not, and I can say that. So I was an account manager, and I used to have account specialists under me. Okay. So I actually had like some, not management, but I had
because like I would be considered. I used to be a control freak.
A control freak?
Yeah.
Oh, so you wouldn't trust people?
Well, not that I would trust them.
They wouldn't do as good of a job as you would because they're not you.
I have a particular way I like to do things.
I respect that.
I was like, but then once I learned how to delegate, I think that's the important thing.
Yes, it is.
I would delegate, but I didn't tell the person how I wanted it done. Oh. And then when they didn't do it right, I would complain. Get upset.
Oh, okay.
Jody's worked with me for 19 years. She would be the first one to tell you that I'm a completely different person today.
That's awesome.
Than I was 10 years ago.
Yeah. I would have no idea. I think you do a great job.
I had to learn, like, this is the process. This is the way that I want it done.
Yep.
Here you go.
And yes.
Whereas before I would say, hey, can you just get this done?
And then it's not up to my
standards.
standards.
And then I would say, oh, well, they don't know what they're doing. And it was really, I was the problem.
I see.
But that was a tough
root
pill.
cause analysis.
Yeah, that was a tough pill to swallow, to realize that I'm the problem and it's not everybody else, you know, when you do that. But so just real quick on the single team thing. So where do you see your, you know, kind of business in 5 years? you thought about that? Because I'm sure you have.
I have. I really want, when Justin and I have kids, I want them to be very proud of their mom and like their my accomplishments. And they're like, that's my mom. Like, look what she does. Like, so I would say, obviously Justin and I are coming to the age where we'll have kids soon.
Yeah.
But, and I may take time off, those first 6 months or whatever.
Well, that's the beauty of what you do is the ability to do that and to leverage the relationships that you have and to enjoy that time. I mean, that's the beauty of it.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. Yeah. So I would say I'd like to continue. I'd like to I would say quadruple what I do.
Yeah, that's great.
Because I I want to be able to manage I want to be able to give the attention to my clients that they deserve. I never want to over leverage myself.
Yeah.
And so then if that happens and I have to bring somebody on for, assistance or whatever, I'm open to that. But I'm not the agent that's super hard on themselves and I have to sell this amount. I have goals and I do work very hard to get those goals, but I'm also human, And
I think what happens when you have a business of how you have it structured, it's a lot easier to scale when you have structure.
Yes. Yeah.
It's hard to go from 0 to 10 deals a year, 0 to 12 deals a year. That's hard.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But it's much easier to go from 12 to 48.
100%.
Because you're scaling whatever you did to go to the 0 to 10. So I don't think a lot of people realize it's harder to get going.
Yes.
It's easier to scale.
Yep.
And I think you do such a good job of your processes and the way you structure everything and organizing Google Drive is obviously important.
I mean, I'd love to show you.
I listen, Mike and I would appreciate it. We could probably use some help in that area.
It's literally numbered and so that's why back to your point, I would say everything's outlined.
Yeah. But I think that's in a situation how you're structured, your business is going to grow very organically and not with a lot of extra effort.
Yeah.
Because once the business comes in, you're not going to lose, because what happens to a lot of agents or a lot of lenders, they start getting busy. Mm-hmm. They don't have a process or the team to support it. Okay. And stuff kind of falls through the cracks. And you never know what you lose because you're not able to take it in.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And in someone like yourself, your business grows very organically.
Yeah.
So business starts coming in.
Yeah.
Your process absorbs it.
Right.
And you grow. And you never know any different.
No.
Okay. So when the market shifts and rates start to come down, your business is going to grow.
Right.
Okay. And you're going to be able to handle it.
Yes.
There's going to be other people that they're going to lose business
because
they'll still be busy.
Yeah.
But maybe not busy.
Inefficient.
Inefficient. Yeah. So I think that's the advantage of process and systems and everything else. So last thing I wanted to talk about, which is the fun stuff. If you were not a realtor, what is Jessica's dream job? What would you be doing?
What would I be doing? If money.
Yeah, money wasn't an issue. You just, what's your dream job?
I would probably, one of the things I've always wanted to do is work with animals in some capacity. I think a lot of my friends know that I do a lot of work. I used to be a foster mom for a lot of different shelters.
What was that like?
Oh my God, it was nuts. At one time I had 9 kittens.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That was in college.
I was going to say.
It was in college.
Your husband wouldn't go for that. Yeah,
not now. Yeah. But, I would probably say something with animals or something where I can just be creative. I'm very blunt and honest. And I do feel like sometimes I'm able to advocate for people that maybe can't speak up for themselves.
Oh, I love that.
Because I don't you can not like me and that's fine. But I work really hard my mom will always say I would always want you on my side. Yeah. And I don't want to say a fight, but in a disagreement. So speaking for people who maybe aren't able to speak for themselves, and advocating for them. I just love being
that's
honest
awesome.
In myself.
Yeah, that's awesome because I feel like having that outlet and kind of having that, you should try to find a way to maybe use events around.
That's true.
And try to find a way to weave it into your business because that can give you some passion and things to do.
That's true.
I know, I have this passion for veteran organizations and things like that.
Love that.
And I was just meeting with a realtor who's a veteran this morning, and he was asking me, he's like, well, what? And I just remember someone had said to me, everyone always says they support veterans, but what do you actually do? Yeah, what do you do? And that has stuck with me.
Yeah.
So I always found
That's
a way to
awesome.
kind of like, try to find ways to do it. So maybe you can find something to do with,
a great idea.
rescues and,
That's a great idea.
and try to find a way to, do a fundraiser or do an event with all your
Yep.
adoption event or something.
I do
Yeah.
once a year. I do
that's
my
awesome.
fundraising.
Yeah.
I call it
Yeah.
Santa Paws is coming to town.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I raise funds, and then I go out. I pick a local shelter, and then I purchase things for them from their wish list.
That's,
and I
that's,
donate it.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's like one big thing in my business too. A part of my like buyer questionnaire or listing questionnaire, it asks at the very end, like a big part of my business is giving back to the community.
Yeah.
So I always ask them if there's an organization that they really care about, and then I make a donation to that organization on their
Great.
behalf, because like, we can all have our own opinions about whatever, but if my client knows, loves, and trusts me, I want to give back to them in a way,
Yeah.
and give back to the community. So that's a big part of my business too, is just supporting.
I think it's really important because this business can burn you out really quick. And if you only do it for the money.
Oh my God, you just can't.
You can't.
You have to enjoy what you're doing.
This is not a fulfilling career.
No, it's not.
If you're only going to do it for money.
Yeah, it's not, because there's so many things like in transactions, the letdowns, people don't realize transactions can fall apart for whatever reason. I mean, you just really have to have a lot of integrity in the business.
One thing I
get
wanted to
back
ask
up.
you that I didn't ask you before we go is, I know you moved around a lot as a child, being a family and military. And obviously having that experience as a kid is something that probably stuck with you.
Oh my God, yeah.
Does
Trauma.
that apply
Just
to does that apply though to helping families move? Because obviously you help people do that.
Yes.
And you
yes.
in some way, like again, I lived in the same house most of my young, so I didn't experience that until I got older.
Yes.
But moving around, that's something that you obviously remember you took with you.
Yes.
How does that help you today when you're dealing with clients moving?
I know how stressful it was on our family.
Yeah.
Like moving around, packing up, my mom having to find new dentists, like things that you, like somebody who grew up in the same area would take for granted because you don't know any different. But my mom would always talk about the challenges with finding new doctors, new dentists, just everyday things every 6 months to 2 years. I mean, that's exhausting. So I know that the clients I'm working with, they may or may not have that same experience, but I can only imagine, like, it was stressful on us doing it all the time. If these people have never done it, that's even more stressful because they're not familiar with, the process of having to pack everything up. You find your memories, you're going through things and you're like, oh my gosh, I have so much stuff I didn't realize. Then you have to, emotionally detach yourself from some of those things. So I have a lot of empathy for my clients in that regard.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm sure you saw your mom have to go through a lot. Obviously, supporting your mom had to be a pretty
big supporter of my father.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about, you want to have your kids look up. I mean, so
I love my mom.
I think
She's
it's
a
going to
saint.
be I think you're going to be an amazing mother because of that, because you do work very hard.
Yeah, thank you.
And I always say, like, when I talk about Jake, like
He's
I
got
always,
two great role models.
well, I always like struggle, like, do I work too much, or am I, but at the same time, my dad was always busy and I always saw that. So I feel like I wouldn't have the work ethic that I did
without him,
that I do if it wasn't for my dad.
Yes.
And obviously you saw a military, if your dad was in the military, your mom, the spouse sometimes doesn't get the same recognition.
No.
As the spouse is one of the most important pieces of the puzzle that kind of hold everything together at home. So
I 100%
you
agree with
growing up around that obviously shaped a lot of where you are now. And so do your parents live in Ohio still?
Yeah, they're in Ohio. So my dad was he retired after almost 23 years as a lieutenant colonel. He was an officer. Yeah. So he was in for a long time. And my work ethic, I would say, like, I know it's personality too, but like my dad's a really, and I'm an oldest.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and my dad always, my 18th birthday, we're at the bank opening a credit card. Because he's like, you can only put your gas on here and your books or something like that. Like, so I learned how to manage that at a young age.
So who was the disciplinarian out of your mom and dad?
Oh my God, my dad.
Okay, yeah.
My dad was your very, like, if you met him now, you would have no idea that he was like in charge of things. He's a super sweet guy. But like he's very hard on his family.
Yeah.
Like his family's his unit.
But do you feel like you you needed that and that
Oh my
you
God,
learned.
I was such a terrible child. Absolutely. Yeah, the discipline that I got was well-deserved. I would never be like, why did you, like, what? Well, Jess, when you're coming home at like 4 a.m. and you're like, not that old, that's not okay.
Yeah.
So no, I couldn't ask for better parents. They've been really,
I think it's
really
important
great role
because
models.
I ask that because it's funny. Sometimes, dads are tough, but then when it comes to their daughter, it's like,
oh no, my dad's not like that.
Okay, that's good.
No,
that's good.
He's like, and I know you would think military father.
Yeah.
He's got two. It's me, my sister Jenny, and my little brother Jeremy.
Yeah.
Everyone always forgets I have a little brother because Jenny and I would just. Okay.
We overpower. You overpower.
We do. He's married. I'm like, he's probably a great husband. He knows everything about women.
He had to deal with two sisters.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
And his wife is so even keel. So I'm like, Jer, you're probably a great husband.
You got to be like, you need to thank me.
You're welcome for being crazy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I built you. I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
But that's. Yeah.
Well, I love it. So, Jessica, I really appreciate the time. It was great to sit down. I'm excited. Even sitting down and hearing you say you've only been in the business for 3 years is like, remarkable in itself. Because when we work together, I don't think of you as someone who's been in the business for 3 years. So congratulations on, an amazing 3 years.
Thank you.
I'm excited to see kind of where your business goes. And I appreciate you taking an hour to come and sit with us and kind of go through. And it was fun to get to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You guys are great. I enjoy working with all of you guys, and here's to many more transactions.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.